I'm back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, and now joining us, Ellis Williams, to talk wide receivers. Let's get right to it. The big question, it's an obvious one. It's Odell Beckham Jr. Is he a Cleveland Brown next season?
Oh, it's such a great question, Dan. It's such a great question. And I think it's one that the Browns haven't answered for themselves yet. And it's a tough one. It is a very tough one. And if you're putting my feet to the fire right now, are you?
Sure, why not? If you're asking, yeah, we are.
And then I'm going to say no. I mean, if I have to pick yes or no, I'm going to say no. And the reason why I'm going to say no is because of the 15.25 or whatever it is $1 million contract that he has next year. Do they like Odell Beckham Jr.? Yes. They like Odell a lot. Baker likes Odell. And as we can see over this past week or so, Odell really came to really like the Browns. He loves Kevin Stefanski. Those two guys have grown close. And so if it works out that he is going to be here, I think everybody will be fine and they'll make it work. I think that if Odell had been here healthy, when the lights came on for Baker, they would have come on for Odell as well. I think those guys would have been fine together. I think Odell would have flourished in this system and in this scheme, and Baker wouldn't have had any trouble finding him. I also think they would not have made the playoffs without Odell Beckham Jr. because he had 3 touchdowns against the Dallas Cowboys and basically won that game by himself. If they don't win that game, they are not in the playoffs. So he was pivotal to this season, even though he missed most of it. So from a talent standpoint, off the charts, of course. Can the Browns use him and would he fare very well here? Yes. But with everything that they have to do in terms of extending guys and paying guys, and with a cap that might end up hitting a floor, a collectively bargained floor of potentially $175 million in 2021, which is almost $25 million less than it is this year. If that happens, you've got to cut corners somewhere. And I just think that they're going to look long and hard at whether or not they can afford to keep Odell Beckham Jr. when they proved that their offense actually can function pretty well without him.
Yeah, we talked all week about the luxuries that Browns may have to cut ties with. Sheldon Richardson was one of them we mentioned this week, and Odell might be another guy. When your 2 receivers are in the top 4 of your paid roster, that's going to become an issue, especially when the numbers don't put them as, top 10 receivers in this league, just from a number standpoint. Selfishly, I hope Odell's back. There's nothing like watching an athlete like that in person open up his stride on a deep post, and they don't even have to throw the ball to him. I just, being there at First Energy, watching him run and open up like that. The Dallas game, the reverse Mary Kay. I'm so glad you mentioned it. It's just breathtaking ability of Odell Beckham Jr. that I don't think is replaceable. I know we're going to spend this whole offseason talking about how Donovan Peoples-Jones can be the heir apparent to Odell or step up in his absence. It's not going to happen. They are simply just different athletes. DPJ, I think, is going to be a good receiver in this league, but you don't replace a star receiver with rookie talent unless you're the Minnesota Vikings. They traded Stephon Diggs, who finished this year at number 1 in receiving yards, and then the rookie Justin Jefferson out of LSU finished 3rd. That doesn't happen in this league, and I don't expect them to spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver this year in the draft, and that's where this becomes problematic if Odell Beckham Jr. is not back, because now the blueprint's out on how to combat the Browns offense. You get physical with them. You get in the face of these receivers. The Ravens were the first ones to do it. Jimmy Smith got hurt, and it changed the entire game plan in the second half of that Monday night game. But Kansas City was healthy in their secondary from start to finish, and it showed. They got up in Rashard's face. They got in Jarvis's face, even putting Jarvis on the grass at some points just with physical press coverage. And that's going to keep happening. And Odell's the only guy on this roster that is a difference maker in repeated man coverage. And without him, I don't know how the Browns replace it.
I would have to say, though, he didn't even fare well in that kind of press man, get up in your face, get bullied coverage against the Ravens over the years. So even though he does so many things well, I don't know that he would have fared all that well necessarily against the Chiefs. He struggled with that kind of coverage himself.
Yep. No, I agree with that. From an athletic standpoint, I'm just saying that on the roster, the Browns are Odell is the only guy on the Browns roster that can do that. Like I said this on Gotta Watch the Tape. I think they missed JoJo Natson versus the Chiefs, and those are very different receivers in Odell Beckham Jr. and JoJo Natson. But just from a quick twitch standpoint, those are the two guys on the roster that are capable of that, and they didn't have either on Sunday.
So one of the things that I think is worth pointing out, though, is when we look at the Final Four in the NFL right now, every single one of those teams has a dynamic receiver, right? You've got in Green Bay, you've got Devontae Adams. Tampa, you've got Mike Evans. And I know Mike Evans didn't have like the typical Mike Evans year this year, getting used to Tom Brady, but he's still Mike Evans. Still went over 1,000 yards. We saw what Stephon Diggs did for Josh Allen in Buffalo. And then with Mahomes, I know we talk a lot about the Mahomes-Kelsey thing and all of that, but I mean, we all got to see it in person. We see it every single week what Tyreek Hill means to that Chiefs. So there's a reason the Chiefs have put up with everything Tyreek Hill brings to the table. And it's because his skill set and what he can do, he can get you that 4th and 1 because you just can't defend him when he's in motion coming out of the backfield. He's too fast and he's too reliable. We see that catch that Kevin Stefanski challenged that they got upheld, that spectacular catch. The one against Denver that Andy Reid should have challenged but didn't. So having that, it's almost like the dynamic receiver is having a comeback